Hello, my name is Lisa Hines, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Sydney studying fashion and sustainability. Today I'm presenting my paper titled Weaving Solutions, a Social Practice Approach to Microfiber Pollution. Looking out at beautiful Sydney Harbour from the rooftop of my apartment building, the perfection of the sparkling ripples makes it easy to forget the levels of pollution present in our oceans. And, as this conference has no doubt already illuminated, levels of plastic pollution have risen to the point that upwards of 165 million tons of plastic is currently in the ocean, with some estimates suggesting plastic will outweigh fish by 2050. Microplastics are of particular concern because of the inability to easily collect them from water due to their minuscule size, and because aquatic life ingests the microplastics, and thus anyone or thing who ingests the aquatic life is inadvertently eating plastic. This information led former US President Barack Obama to ban plastic microbeads in face wash in 2015, with other countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the UK following suit. However, there remains a growing concern for microfibers from polyester, acrylic, nylon, and other synthetic fabrics, as they are being found in aquatic life in oceans and other waterways. As noted in this report about the Great Lakes in the United States, the first time Professor Sherry Mason cut open a Great Lakes fish, she was alarmed at what she found. Synthetic fibers were everywhere. Under a microscope, they seemed to be weaving themselves into the gastrointestinal tract. Though she had been studying aquatic pollution around the Great Lakes for several years, Mason, who works for the State University of New York, Fredonia, had never seen anything like it. Microfiber pollution has been brought to light in recent years as an environmental cost of apparel production and use. Synthetic fibers constitute over 50% of all fabric produced, which has resulted in the unforeseen consequence of plastic microfibers appearing in waterways, on coastlines, and inside fish and fish-eating birds alongside other microplastics, as they escape standard washing machine filters, wastewater treatment facilities, and filters at textile manufacturing facilities. Response from the apparel and fashion industry has been minimal, with the exception of outdoor retailer and sustainability proponent Patagonia, which has funded further research into the problem. Proposed solutions to date largely rely on consumer behavior change through the use of special laundering bags like the Guppy Friend, aftermarket washing machine filters, suggestions to reduce washing, and the use of front-loader washing machines. In this paper, I build upon Elizabeth Shove's theories of social change to argue for a move beyond consumer behavior change tactics and towards a more thorough understanding of the co-evolved practices of apparel production and consumption in order to shed light on the emerging problem and potential solutions of microfiber pollution. Environmental action that relies upon an individual behavior change has been shown to be flawed through the continual appearance of an attitude-behavior gap or value-action gap, which refers to the difference between people's environmental values and intentions and their environmental actions. The proposed solutions for microfiber pollution place the responsibility to change with the consumer, with little to no mention of changing fashion industry or wastewater treatment practices, and seemingly no acknowledgement of the attitude-behavior gap in environmental behavior change studies. Furthermore, there does not appear to be recognition that the current practices of buying, wearing, and washing apparel have not simply emerged on their own, but have co-evolved alongside changes to industry standards, fabric preferences, expectations of cleanliness, and washing machine technology. Elizabeth Shove builds upon the understanding that attitudes do not necessarily influence behavior change in her argument for a move away from what she calls ABC policies of environmental change, those based on the attitude-behavior choice model of environmental change. She explains consumer behavior is located within rather than outside the system. It makes no sense to attribute behavioral change to a cast of externalized factors. Instead, the model is one in which institutions, infrastructures, and daily life interact. Shove is critical of the focus on individual action, like using a Guppy Friend, for instance, suggesting greater emphasis on the practice itself, including the recognition that social practices are not performed in isolation. In some of her earlier work, Chauve argued that the practice of laundry can be understood as a system of systems and is co-produced by those doing laundry, their values, tools, and time commitments. She points toward the change in cultural norms that have led to an expectation that people should always wear freshly laundered clothes to signal that practices can and do change. But instead of looking just at the actor doing the laundry, we must consider cultural, technological, and societal influences that have allowed the practice to change. Her insistence that a revised agenda of consumption, everyday life, and sustainability needs to concentrate on the processes through which habits are acquired and jettisoned, and on the relation between consumption and convention, technology and practice, provides a useful line of departure to rethink solutions to microfiber pollution. The overlapping systems that constitute the manufacture, design, retail, promotion, and use of apparel can be understood as a practice complex, a network consisting of interrelated practices that share common elements and have the power to change and influence one another. There are shared elements amongst each of these practices that can be examined for their role in the coevolution of microfiber pollution. In this paper, I will consider the practice of producers through a case study of Patagonia, the practice of sustainable fashion, and the practices of consumption and use to demonstrate some of the connections amongst the practices and to highlight their complexities. As a result of understanding the complexity of microfiber creation and pollution, we can begin to grasp the necessary complexity of solutions that will be required to solve this problem. Outdoor retailer Patagonia has been at the forefront of sustainable fashion technology for over 20 years. They have used only organic cotton in their cotton products since 1996, were the first outdoor clothing manufacturer to use post-consumer plastic bottles to create recycled polyester for their fleece jackets in 1993, and have innovated recycling down for their coats and vests, as well as natural rubber for their wetsuits, among other technologies. The company is regularly heralded as one of the most environmentally and socially sustainable businesses around the world thanks to these commitments, as well as their activist mentality, which includes participation in 1% for the planet, the use of fair trade certified factories, and their active clothing repair practice. As an avid environmentalist myself, it almost feels a bit traitorous for me to critique their practice here, and yet we must understand Patagonia's evolution to understand the rise of microfiber pollution. Traditionally, outdoor apparel was created out of natural fibers, predominantly wool, cotton, and leather. These materials were deemed to be limiting to those spending vast quantities of time outdoors. Wool and cotton absorb and hold on to moisture, whereas leather is very durable but incredibly heavy. As outdoor sports and other activities became more popular, materials innovations sought to make enjoying the great outdoors even more enjoyable through improved comfort. The synthetic waterproof fabric known as Gore-Tex was created in 1969, and Patagonia started making polyester pile sweaters in 1976, which were incredibly warm and insulated when wet, but also dried within minutes, as compared to traditional cotton sweaters or wool sweaters. Soon after, synthetic undergarments and long johns were made with polypropylene, which does not absorb moisture, but wicks it off the skin and onto the absorbent outer layers, like the polyester pile sweater, thus keeping the wearer warm and dry. And Patagonia soon mastered the art of layering using a variety of synthetic fabrics. All of these advances were created with the mindset of improving performance. Climbers could wear lighter layers, be more agile and more comfortable, and stay outdoors longer than when burdened by heavy and damp natural fibers. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the result of this reliance on synthetic fibers is appearing as microfiber pollution. No doubt a painful realization for this outdoor-loving company whose mission statement reads, "Build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis." Now, I'd like to specifically examine Patagonia's fleece jackets, which are made of post-consumer plastic waste and are a known source of microfiber pollution. Patagonia are aware of this pollution and even funded research to understand how much microfiber pollution comes off the jackets during the wash. This research found that there is significantly more shedding of microfibers when washed in a top-loader washing machine, and that the older the garment and the lower quality the garment, the more the garment sheds in the wash. The fact that older garments shed more should not come as a surprise, but again could be seen as an additional disappointment for the firm based on their encouragement of wearing clothes for many years, repairing instead of replacing, and hosting a used Patagonia clothing store on their US website. A nylon shell jacket was included in the test and also shed a significant amount of fiber, suggesting that polyester fill escapes through seams or through the shell fabric. As a result of these findings, Patagonia has promised further research, but has also promoted the Guppy Friend, the bag that consumers are encouraged to wash their clothing inside in order to capture microfibers. There's a slight suggestion on Patagonia's website that they will investigate more natural fiber solutions, but given the history of relying upon synthetics to aid in outdoor activity performance, it's probably naive to assume any new non-polluting fabrics will be introduced very soon. Outdoor apparel companies are not the only ones relying on synthetic garments, and the fast fashion industry is particularly keen on the use of synthetics and synthetic blends. Examining the rise of the fast fashion business model against fashion trends, there is a direct correlation in the rise of synthetic fabrics and this business model, not to mention the vast increase in post-consumer textile waste since the turn of the 21st century. Clothing production has doubled from 2000 to 2014, which mimics the explosive expansion of fast fashion labels, particularly H&M and Zara, and the rise of polyester fiber production over natural fibers. Synthetics are typically cheaper to create and thus are the preferred option for businesses with a rapid style turnover and those designing for less than 10 wears, a common trait amongst those operating under this business model. H&M, a supposed supporter of sustainable fashion through their commitment to better cotton, a clothing recycling program, and annual investment in the Global Change Award, which seeks new technologies to support closed-loop fast fashion, has refrained from making any public comment about microfiber pollution. Its competitor Zara has commented that the solution is the remit of the wastewater management teams at their textile mills, each brand appearing to distance itself from this particularly tricky problem. The sustainable fashion movement is also implicated in the rise of microfiber pollution. First, a common suggestion from the movement is to buy less, choose well, make it last, quality not quantity. Well-made goods are less likely to shed fibers, and yet as products age, more microfibers will shed with each wash. We can see this in the pilling or the slight fuzz we see on our clothes as they start to wear out. While keeping garments for many years has the benefit of keeping the fabric out of landfill, it also means the garment will shed its fibers. As with so many other sustainability dilemmas, there's no easy solution. Second, as a growing number of brands have sought sustainable materials to produce clothing, a really popular option has been the use of recycled plastic bottles in polyester fibers. This has been particularly popular in activewear brands like Nike, Adidas, and Lululemon, as well as smaller brands like Tiki and the Australian label Witchery. Parley for the Oceans is an environmental group committed to cleaning up the oceans, and they've partnered with Sea Shepherd to collect used fishing nets to create products for Adidas and G-Star. By doing so, it is likely they've inadvertently added to the problems of microfiber ocean pollution. At each level of material and apparel production, various choices made based on performance, style, and even sustainability can be seen to impact the likelihood of microfiber pollution. I'll turn briefly now to the consumer experience of buying, wearing, and using clothing to consider their role in the fashion practice complex. In a recent study I conducted with fashion shoppers, I came across Paige, a 30-something-year-old woman with a young child and a job in a very conservative bank. Unprompted, she brought up microfiber pollution, saying, "I read an article about how polyester is destroying our waterways, and I'd just come to the conclusion that silk is too hard to wash, and maybe instead I should look for stuff like polyester that's easier to wash and wear. Now I don't know what to do. I've got a very ethical friend, and she's like, I've read all these articles about sweatshops and how things are produced, and I'm not going to buy any new clothes. I'll either buy them secondhand or I'll buy fair trade. And I'm like, I have so much respect for that, but I just love clothes and I want to look nice, and I don't know if I'll be able to find nice things. There are a few concepts I want to point out from Paige's comments. First, although she does not define herself as an ethical consumer, she was informed on a number of ethical and sustainable fashion issues. Oftentimes, sustainable fashion activists work from the understanding that the average consumer is uneducated on sustainability issues. But in my study with Australian shoppers, which was small, a qualitative study of just 19, over half the participants brought up sustainability issues with no prompting. Second, we see the layers of complexity in her own practice of using fashion. Paige is weighing up concepts like ease of wash and wear against ethical issues of microfiber pollution. She's a busy working mother who must dress a particular way for work, and the time and cost involved in washing silk is something that is troubling her at the moment. And finally, when she references her ethical friend, we get a glimpse of the stigma that is common amongst shoppers and many in the fashion industry that sustainable or ethical fashion does not have the same aesthetic qualities as regular fashion items. Though this part of her comment was directed more specifically toward fair trade and not sustainable materials, the fact that these ideas were all brought up together suggests that ethical and sustainable fashion both raise style concerns, which are compounded with her time and financial constraints and feeling appropriately attired for her workplace to build up an incredibly complicated practice of fashion for this consumer. In this same study, other participants spoke of the preference for fast fashion items when the items were deemed somewhat disposable, even amongst those who value vintage, designer, or ethical clothing in general. Explanations included not wanting to spend too much money on t-shirts that get worn and washed a lot and ultimately have short lifespans because of it, and summer attire that gets a lot of wash due to Sydney's sticky, sweaty summers, and therefore should not be invested too heavily in. H&M and Zara are the favorite go-to brands for these purposes because of their low prices and stylish cuts, but other brands also get purchased based on price and accessibility. As mentioned earlier, these brands privilege the use of low-quality synthetics and blends. The increased wash of these heavy-use items would likely lead to increased microfiber shedding, even before they find their way to an early grave in the landfill. The study was not about microfiber pollution, so questions regarding frequency of wash and/or the potential of using a guppy friend were not specifically raised, but we can begin to see how consumer behavior is already complex, layered, and problematic before we begin to ask consumers to change or add any behavior to prevent microfiber pollution. Apparel companies are unlikely to have understood that the creation of synthetic fabrics would lead to microplastic pollution that impacts aquatic life, not to mention anyone or thing up the food chain, through the shedding of synthetic microfibers. Nor do consumers actively choose for the rise in synthetic fabrics, even if they have benefited from better performance and/or lower prices as a result. The reliance on consumer behavior change, including guppy friends, washing machine filters, reduced washing, and/or choosing front-loader machines, appears to only address the final symptom of microfiber shedding, and not the underlying cause of a reliance on synthetic fibers that do not naturally break down or biodegrade. In this paper, I have attempted to map the complexity and coevolution of our reliance on synthetic fibers from the perspective of the practices of fashion production, sustainable fashion, and fashion consumption and use. The interconnected practices in the fashion practice complex must all be taken into consideration when deciding how to move toward a comprehensive solution to microfiber pollution. I don't want to suggest that the end user of garments, consumers, have no responsibility, particularly in the short to medium term. After all, the clothes are already in our closets. If there's something we can do, perhaps we should. However, the current proposals appear to place all responsibility with consumers, and, as I've suggested, the apparel industries must increase their role in finding a solution. Whether this is through fabric innovation, including finding natural alternatives that will meet performance, style, and price expectations, the development of non-shedding synthetic fibers, improved wastewater technologies, or other solutions requires further investigation and research. Importantly, any way forward must acknowledge the complexity of the problem so that the necessary complexity of a solution or solutions can be found. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to engaging with all of you online throughout